Now, most teachers are happy to hear that behaviour management should come from a place of love and affection and care and connection, and we can all get behind that. But here's the truth that most people don't want to hear is that it should also be authoritative, and affection alone isn't enough. Now, without authority, what happens is someone else will take the place of the authority, if you like. If you're not the boss of your school, the most disruptive children will be. If you're not the boss of your classroom, it's the disruptive children that will lead what that classroom looks like, what the playground looks like, what assemblies and hallways look like. So authority is as important as affection, and that's not just for behaviour, but it's also going to contribute to their learning, to children feeling safe and secure, and also for them to learn about life in general, which has consequences and boundaries. Now, I've spent almost 20 years working with young people in secondary schools, primary schools, youth clubs in inner London, and I've really come to believe and kind of know actually, quite confidently, that this is the framework. I've kind of developed it and called it the authority and affection framework, and it's really the one that will work in all settings. You might have heard of the term in loco parentis, which means in the place of parents, and that's what a parent would be like. They'd have to be the boss, they'd have to put boundaries in place, but of course they love their children, they'd want the best for them, they'd be warm, they'd be caring. This would be, a good parent, the ideal parent. And so this is what you're going for in any setting where you work with young people. And I've worked with challenging young people, I've worked with difficult children. It's always been that approach that works the best, that you've connected with them, that you've built a relationship, but they've also learnt where the lines are and not to cross them. And this framework isn't based on theory. It's built from real classroom experience. I've been a teacher. It's built from seeing what playgrounds look like, what assemblies look like, what youth club settings look like. I've got my own children. I know what it looks like in the home as well. And I've had an impact on children and whole classes and settings with this framework. So we're going to have a look at this. And if you're a school setting, if you're a primary school setting, one of your priorities, of course, will be academic. You can't shy away from that. And even in terms of that, happy children who are safe and secure learn better. So even if you are focused on academics, you want this authority and affection. You want affection and consistent boundaries, and they'll serve that purpose too. Now I want to start with this, what I call the false choice, if you like, because teachers don't consciously make a choice to be the kind of firm teacher or the kind of fun teacher, but it happens in practice. They kind of fall into it, and it might be that they think, oh well, I'll try and be firm, for example, and then they give a warning to a child, and then the child does it again, and it's in that moment where they have to follow through and say, actually, you've now crossed the line, that the decision comes: are they that kind of firm teacher, are they that fun teacher? And that's where they might say, that's another warning, and the third time they might sort of say, come on, you've had a couple of warnings already. And by that point it should have been, a consequence could have come in. And it's the idea that if I'd put a consequence at that time, I'm no longer the fun teacher, I'm no longer the warm teacher. And it's a false dichotomy. You can definitely have both. You don't have to say, I'm going to prioritize control of this classroom, or I'm going to prioritize connection with these children. You can have both, and you should. Behaviour management that is efficient and that is the best shouldn't force us to choose, and it combines authority and affection. Yes, you can have strict boundaries and warm relationships. In fact, that is what you're going for. That's what you should be aiming for. Yes, you can give consequences and be loved by your class. You can be the favourite teacher, if you like. And I've seen that for myself. I've seen it with lots of teachers, but I remember one deputy head in particular, and he would walk around the school, and if he went into a classroom, he'd sit up straight and they'd sort of whisper to each other that he'd come in, and I thought, he's very strict. And when I asked children, who's your favourite teacher, or do you think Mr. So-and-so is strict, they'd say he was their favourite teacher. They didn't see him as strict. To them, strict were the teachers who shouted. Often the ones I realised were not that in control. They saw that as strict. Those teachers that would actually be out of control, in their minds, that was strictness. The teacher was shouting, the teacher seemed angry. But this teacher, who I knew that they absolutely would kind of fear doing something wrong. It wasn't really fear, but they loved him. And then in my own experience, I wanted to become that as well. And I started off with this kind of consistency and routines, but I also connected with the children and sort of always used a sense of humour. And time after time, and it is cringe saying it about myself, but they would say, you're the best teacher, you're my favourite teacher. And I know they always say that, but they'd go on through the school and come back and say it when they'd had, other teachers after me and teachers before me. So I sort of believed them. So you can have both, and the best behaviour management does have both. So we want to look at why one or the other isn't an ideal place to be. All authority, it might actually be effective. If you look back to sort of Victorian era, they were all authority and they had good behaviour control. I won't call it behaviour management because they weren't really managing different children's behaviour, they just controlled them. But it creates fear. It doesn't create a place where children can grow, can develop their character, their creativeness. It just creates that fear. And then if you're all affection, it might feel nice, but it doesn't prepare children for the real world. And also, it makes life harder for you. I don't know if you've ever seen parents in the shops or at the park and they're trying to get their child to do something. And because they're all affection, it's all very nice. Come on, please, come on, we've got to go. And you think that's taking that parent half an hour. So all affection isn't what we're going for, and all authority isn't what we're going for either. So once you've got this authority and affection framework, it should be over everything you do. So you don't just go into it kind of making things like your behaviour policy just based on what you think. You actually have this kind of umbrella and you're trying to make everything linked to it. Does our behaviour policy show that we're authoritative and we are the ones who are in control of the school and the classrooms and we're the boss? But also, is it warm? Is it affectionate? Does it give us lots of opportunities to connect with our children and show them that we care? It should link to your behaviour policy, your classroom systems, playtime routines, your hallway transitions, assembly expectations, and you look at everything under that umbrella. And often schools, of course, have systems with rewards and consequences, and those have to link back to that as well. So they shouldn't just be authoritative. They shouldn't just be affectionate. They need to be both. And when you start to create these school systems, schools often like to use things like values. Our school's values are kindness, perseverance, and compassion or something. And those are good. I wouldn't say do away with those. But you as the ones making the policies, you as the ones acting out that behaviour in the school, behaviour management, need to really unpick that and know what that means. Because, for example, kindness in one classroom might be sharing. We share, we let each other use our things. And then in another classroom, the teacher might say, we don't share each other's things, all the stationery's labelled because that causes arguments. So if you haven't unpicked that as a school, you've got inconsistency and children go from one classroom to the other and realise, I don't quite understand what kindness is. So when you have those values, you also have to know what it means under them and make sure each class has the same systems and rules and is using them consistently. You might say, isn't there autonomy? Shouldn't teachers be able to kind of do their own thing? What I would say is that autonomy should be for teaching styles, how you engage with the children, how you make your lessons enjoyable, how you teach. But something like behaviour can't really be left to each teacher's autonomy and should have a clear system that everyone really is using. And so that kind of leads me on to the next point anyway, that this has to be a whole school commitment. It can't be something that one or two kind of good behaviour managers are doing, or two passionate teachers will make sure, but others don't. If it's going to work, everyone has to be told, everyone has to be trained. You have to get your whole staff together and say, this is what we believe, this is how we respond to these behaviours, this is how we show authority, this is how we're showing affection. And the goal really is one united voice. And that's how children feel secure and feel safe and know exactly where they stand. That's how routines stick, and that's how culture is built. You might have heard the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's not always used in the school context, but ultimately it sounds good. You want culture, you want children to do things because it's the right thing to do, because they understand right and wrong. but you don't develop that without a strategy first. And when that strategy is across the whole school and everyone's doing it, it will develop into a culture. Now, when we look at things like boundaries and being kind of really consistent with them, people can often think of it sort of in that, the Trunchbull way. The boundaries part is the kind of authoritative, but actually all of it links together. Boundaries are also affection. Okay, it's not like a straitjacket that restricts them. It's actually more like a fence, if you like, that keeps them safe. The way you have a fence around the playground. It's not to trap the children. It's to protect them from, leaving and getting themselves into danger or danger coming in. And that's what boundaries in behaviour do. You've probably seen it. Children have got themselves into a situation where they're emotionally dysregulated. They wouldn't like to be in the situation they've got themselves into. A boundary, a really clear boundary, would have helped them in that situation, would have allowed them not to get into that situation where they're now out of control, they don't want to be in that situation, they're uncomfortable, and they're in some emotional territory that they're not ready for and they don't want to be in. There was a documentary actually, and it was all about kids who were left in a house with no rules. And of course, what do you think happened? It was chaos. In fact, some of them started trying to make rules that they had to stick to, because deep down, children need someone to be in charge. They need those barriers. And I can't remember. I think maybe it was a Channel 4 documentary. And I'll look for the name and maybe put it in the description. But it's really interesting. But it really makes that point. The boundaries are part of the affection. They're part of the care and the love. And so really, to promote this, it also has to be explained to children. To get this culture, you don't just have your kind of rules and your boundaries. You say, this is why we can't do this and why we do this. You say this rule exists because of this reason. This rule exists because we care. This consequence is because we need to keep you safe. I wouldn't be doing my job if I let that slide. This wouldn't be a safe school if we allowed this to happen. And you're always explaining why things are the way they are. I'd do that right at the beginning if I had a new class, and then you do it, of course, as you go on, and you do it in assemblies and PSHE lessons and so on. So really, to come to conclusion, the takeaway of this is that the authority and the affection framework only works if it's a whole school approach. It can't be kind of a poster on the wall. It's not kind of a one-day inset and no one thinks about it again. It has to live in the school, your learning walks, your observations, day-to-day practice. This is how consistency is built, and this is how you'll build a culture. So if you do care about your children, which of course you do, your staff, your school community, then it's not a choice between authority and affection. It's definitely getting both and putting everything you do under that umbrella. Because boundaries are affection, they are love, and without guidance, that kind of affection and care just isn't enough. Now, if you want to know more about this and you want to connect with me, my Instagram is below. I share tips there. You can send me a DM there if you want to know anything else. We can set up a call if you want to just talk about your school situation in particular. I'll do that, a short call for free. Just follow the Instagram, send a DM, and it'll be great to hear from you. I hope the affection and the authority framework is something you can use and it will make an impact in your setting.